I was just saying we're more live than ever. I was almost like, wait, we're not live because we usually simulcast live, but we're more live than ever because we have people in the audience. So this is very exciting. For those listening later, watching later, welcome to the Good Gut Live podcast. I'm James Marin, an integrative registered dietitian, environmental nutritionist, one of the co-founders of Married to Health.
I'm Delia Marin. I'm an integrative dietitian, certified gastrointestinal nutritionist, and I'm the other co-founder of Married to Health. So we're really excited to be here, excited to do this, not only live, but excited for the topic.
Yes, and so when we're here, we are usually talking about other things. We have guests, we're on the podcast, you're listening. If you're watching, you're noticing this doesn't look like the normal office we're in. And so because it's not, we're in the beautiful EMA space, and we're so happy to be here. And one thing we're going to be talking about today, the thing we're going to be talking about is really our relationship. And so one thing we hear from other practitioners, from our patients is, okay, one person is usually holding the chronic illness. One person is going through it. And then what's happening with the other person? How does that relationship look like? What's that dynamic? It's very rare that it's just the one person, they're on an island and they're doing it alone. And if so, there's some fracturing going on. There's relationship, there's emotions, there's so much to it. So today we're going to be diving into Dalia's health story, a little bit of my health story, how that really shaped who we are today, shaped Married to Health. That whole really, I guess, story of your healing and overcoming IBS, SIBO, PCOS, so much more. You'll get into all that. And so I think I'm going to start with myself because Dalia is a little more intensive. We're going to dive deeper into that. But I think one thing I remember hearing, especially online, we get this a lot, is like, oh, everything's so perfect online. And you're just like, oh, you guys have always been healthy, and you were born integrative dietitians and came out of the womb, and like you eat organic and gluten-free and everything's perfect. And it's like, it's because we were so sick. No one's perfect, right? So that's clear. And I think we're seeing that more on social media where the fractures are happening and the walls, the masks are coming off, where it's like, let's be real, right? And so we like to be real, and I think this topic is very important. We're already talking about poop all day long. So we talk about poop, talk about diarrhea, we talk about it all. And so I grew up a standard American diet, probably even worse, like a standard Mexican American diet. My mom, I had 3 brothers, so it was like scarfing food down because you don't want your brother to eat all the popsicles and you're trying to eat all the popsicles. And so my diet was consistently added sugar. It was, we call it was sugar and plastic. We were talking about the Kraft cheese, not to put some brands under the bus here, but like the cheese and the cracker snacks, I would put the snack packs, the Capri Suns. And when you think about it, it's like, oh, sugar and processed fat wrapped in plastic. And that was my diet consistently. I remember having ice cream every day, Nesquik every day. It was just a constant barrage of added sugar. And on top of that, I was sick all the time. So I would consistently go to the doctor. My mom would take me and I would get amoxicillin, which was the pink bubble gum. I was like, oh, another little treat. And I would take pink bubblegum antibiotics. And so I was consistently on this cycle of eat to feel good, don't feel good, get medications, and then start the cycle over again. And I found myself having joint pain when I was probably my daughter's age, which was around 11. I was having joint pain, so almost on the cusp of like arthritis even, because it was chronic joint pain. I was morbidly obese as a child. So I remember specifically in 3rd grade, we did a class project where we had to weigh ourselves in class. And that was like dreadful as a morbidly obese. This is like trauma that stuck with me. And I weighed the most. In 3rd grade, I was 115 pounds as a 3rd grader, which for those of you that know, you're like, oh no, that's too much. And it was. And so morbidly obese, chronically ill, had tons of allergies, joint pain, asthma. And so was on this trajectory to just inflamed, feeling sick, feeling horrible. And for me, it was realizing when I got a little bit older and kind of battling depression, anxiety, this really gets into the layer I think we're going to get into is realizing, I think when some of our colleagues and close friends hear my health story and my family story and where I grew up, they're like, no way, I would have never guessed that. So again, this is a lot to go through, but the cliff notes is, I grew up in Baldwin Park, California, heavy Mexican American population, lots of gang activity. I luckily was not in a gang, but I was definitely gang adjacent. So a lot of my friends were in gangs. I even had family members in gangs. A lot of fractured in the family. My parents divorced at a young age. Lots of trauma in the home, so abuse, neglect. I mean, you name it. The list was there, and it was a time when you start to then escape, and that's when, looking back, you start to understand. Oh, this idea of you go through a hard time, and we're all trying to escape it somehow. So whether it's with food, whether it's with relationships, whether it's with TV and entertainment, and the list goes on and on. At a very young age, I learned, oh, McDonald's feels good. And oh yeah, these foods aren't just foods, they're making me feel better. And so I soon associated overeating with feeling better because it was a way to escape where I was. So whether that was my environment or that was what was going on or my emotions, it's like I didn't have the parents to be like, let's talk about this and let's dive deeper and understand this. Let's just escape. Let's go to Chunky E. Cheese. Let's go eat. Let's go, grab pizza. And so I found, and it really wasn't until very much later on that I can understand all this, but that was a lot of my struggle. But I'll add to that more, but I think that sets picture nicely of where I was. But I don't know if you want to add to anything I'm forgetting.
You say your Baldwin Parkisms, we call them that when we hear James say something like Chunky Cheese. We're like, your Baldwin Park is showing.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, we have such a uniquely different upbringing in many ways, but parallel lives. And that's when our paths eventually crossed. But it is, I was surprised when I met when I met your family. I was like, wait, this is your family? He seemed like this wholesome nerd. And I was like, okay, he's kind of interesting. He's this nerd, but he has a motorcycle, seems interesting. And then meeting your family was really eye-opening and, seeing where you came from and how hard you had worked to get out of that, but also not realizing how much work there was left to do. I think a lot of the times we come very far and we think, all right, I'm good, I'm healed. Whether it's our gut health, our emotional health, our spiritual health, you make progress and that's great to reflect back on it. But it's always great to, yes, reflect and give that appreciation to the journey and always want to continue to grow. Not necessarily for that destinational happiness where you're saying, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when. But it's, understanding that growth mindset is really part of Heal with Each Meal, which is our, mantra and our Northern Star in Married to Health. But we didn't even realize that was what we were doing as we met and even before we met.
And so what I'll add to that is by the time I met Dahlia, I had got the physical fitness. I was working out and I was benching so much and I had the muscles, I had no neck. And I was feeling a little bit better, but I was still always getting sick because I was on the super high protein, I would say very inflammatory diet, but I looked so good. So I was like, okay, I'll keep doing that. And I had worked so hard in school and I was like, I'm just going to work hard and I'm going to be a health professional and little did I know I was shoving down everything else from my childhood and just boxing it all out. It was nice and boxed up, nice and neat inside of me. And I was building all these other things on it. And then I met Dahlia in college and it was like, okay, you're on the same kind of health journey. So that's where I'll let you're on your health journey and things had overcome already quite a bit, but then there's more to that. But
so, some of those of you listening and some of those who are here in person might have heard some of my health story, but I'll give another little version of it. I grew up, I was a first generation American. My family immigrated here from Egypt, and I was the third child in a family. And it was chaotic. I was I grew up, I was a latchkey kid. Both of my parents worked full time. I was taken care of by my very elderly grandmother. I don't know who's taking care of who now, reflecting back on it. And I'm like, oh, I think I was more there to just keep an eye on her than she was on me. But all that to say, spent a lot of time alone as a kid, even though I had a big family. Everyone was kind of busy doing their thing. My siblings we're all 5 years apart. So by the time, I was cognizant, my siblings were teenagers and didn't really want to hang around with a small child. But I spent a lot of time, I always say TV was my babysitter, and spent a lot of time watching TV, snacking for hours on end in front of the TV, not knowing that I was comfort eating. Same, where it was like, okay, this is lonely. Yes, I would play with neighbor kids, but a lot of the times I was like, this is lonely. I'm here by myself till 9 p.m. and there's no one to help me with my homework. And so TV and I are just going to hang out and eat a whole cheese platter, or we're going to eat a whole box of cereal, or we're going to eat whatever is around and, really just escape in that way. And of course, being more sedentary than most kids my age, eating a lot more ultra processed foods than other kids my age. I also didn't have the healthiest immune system. So I had my tonsils removed at 5 years old because I had frequent tonsillitis. I was always getting ear infections. I would go to the doctor so frequently. And every time I'd walk away with a prescription and an insult about how much weight I had gained since the last time that I was there. And I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. So I went from being, an active young child to an overweight adolescent to an obese teenager, and just thought that was the norm. As a teenager, things continued to progress. Not only was my gut health getting worse, I was getting food poisoning from ultra processed fast food that I was eating. I started experiencing chronic UTIs, and the antibiotics only continued. And I knew something was wrong. I just could tell. I didn't have the vibrance that my peers had. I was so much more fatigued. I didn't want to go out and do things with my friends because I was too tired. And so it wasn't until one day I told my mom, hey, or I asked my mom rather, I said, is it normal that I can really loudly hear my blood rushing like next to my ear? And she said, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I'll take you to a doctor. So she thought to take me to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And he checked me out. My ear, nose, and throat were all normal. But he said, the second you walked in, I saw that you have a huge goiter, which is an inflamed thyroid. And he recommended that I see an endocrinologist instead of him because he said, really, there's nothing I can do for you. You don't need me. So I went to an endocrinologist. And again, I mentioned I had gone to the doctor so often, but I never had blood work done once in my life. At that point that I saw that endocrinologist, I was already 17, almost 18. And so that was the first time in my life I ever had blood work done. And thank God I saw a really great endocrinologist. He was very thorough. He could tell things were off. So he did this blood work. I went back for my follow-up thinking he'd tell me, eat this or tweak this little thing. And I was shocked to learn I not only had prediabetes, I had an autoimmune thyroid condition called Hashimoto's that was causing that goiter, that thyroid inflammation. I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. I had fatty liver disease. I had high cholesterol. And he said, hey, this is not great. I'm going to give you 3 prescriptions and then come back in 3 months to see me. And so I remember just being devastated. I went to that follow-up by myself, and I just remember being devastated. And I called my mom and told her what happened, and she said, oh, it's okay. I take all those things too. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to go down that path. I had just seen one of my many awakenings, absolutely, to have that just shocking moment of, no, thank you. I don't want this to be my life. So I went home. I was a good patient. I took my medications. And of course, when you don't change anything, we were just talking about this earlier, when you don't change anything in your lifestyle, but you just try to add medication on top, you're not going to feel better. You're only going to feel worse. And that is what happened to me. So I felt even more fatigued and I felt even more irritable and nothing was really getting better. And so I went back, I told the doctor that, and I asked, what else can I do? And he said, well, you could change your nutrition, but that's hard for a lot of people. And so I was like, okay. So I went home that day from that follow-up and I was like, I have to help myself. I'm not going to get help here. This is the help that they have to offer. And that's okay, right? Physicians are trained. They're medical doctors. So I think when people become upset with doctors, it's like, what did you expect? That's like going to a mechanic and being mad that he can't fix your refrigerator. That's not the right person. So I went to a medical doctor. He gave me medicine. That was his job. But I knew I was going to have to do some research on my own. And so I started Googling, and the internet was so limited at that time, but I was like, what is the thyroid? What is Hashimoto's? Yes. What are these things? And so I just slowly started learning. And then I said, okay, I need some help. I signed up for a nutrition course over summer. It was summer break by that time. So I signed up for a Nutrition 101 class and just loved it. I loved learning about macronutrients, micronutrients, all of these different anatomical, physiological processes that were influenced by nutrients, which now we know is nutrigenomics, but I found it fascinating. So at that time, I was a psychology major. I liked it, didn't love it. I thought, okay, psychology is interesting. I definitely wasn't keeping up. I remember my professor calling me out because I was always napping in class because I had an undiagnosed thyroid condition. And just to put it into perspective with how undiagnosed I was, not only did my goiter scream it, but when you're checking someone's thyroid peroxidase antibody, their TPO, a normal number is less than 35. Mine was over 3,500. So the cutoff for the lab, the highest that they can read is 3,500. So I truly don't know where I actually started. I was just above that. So I could have been 3,501. I could have been 10,000. I will never know. Yeah, I could have been 35 million, but I don't know where I started. All I know is I felt awful. The medication helped a little bit, but really not. And I needed to learn more. So I decided at that point, okay, psychology is cool, but the psychology of eating, I think, is where it's at for me, because I was starting to really understand my relationship with food wasn't the healthiest. So I really started shifting towards psychology of eating, and I'm going to change my major to nutrition. And that's kind of where our paths converge.
Yes. And so at this time, and I think it's really important. That's why we always say, like, we are our patients. Like, we are you. We're not, and we don't ever want to be, or like, we're on a stage, we're better than you. Come to us for advice. Like, that's not the case at all. And I think a really great provider, whether it's an MD, an RD, a DO, any of the acronyms, has that humility to be like, I love you. I want to help you because I see myself in you. And I was there where you are. And I think that brings like this humility and a love and humanity. And that's so important. And then going back to where we met, and one thing I'll say is we were focused so much on nutrition. We were both studying nutrition. We're like, it's all about the food. This is it. And so we went plant-based, fast forward a lot of other details, but by 2000, we met in 2009. By 2000, it maybe took us 2 years or so to be 100% plant-based. And we're like, we're going to be perfect. We're not going to have added sugar, no added oil at the time, no added sugar, no added oil, plant-based.
Oh, I remember my sister used to hate coming over to eat at our house because everything I made was disgusting. It was no oil, bland, no sugar, low salt. And she was like, how are you eating?
Yeah, I remember that. I'd make like Mexican food, but it was like, imagine Mexican food with no salt, no oil. And I looked back and we loved it. But at the time we loved it because it was like, it was making us feel better to some degree. But very quickly, then Dahlia, this is when Dahlia really started having IBS. Or like, oh no, you've had it. But like, it really started to become clear.
It became clear that, because really, I think my IBS became clearest when we started dating.
Yeah.
And James pointed out to me every time we'd go out, I would tell him I had a stomachache after we'd go out to eat. Didn't matter where we went, Mexican food, Asian food, Mediterranean food, it did not matter. Everything. And I was like, oh, it's the soy, it's the wheat, it's the almonds, and he's like, it's everything. You always have a stomach ache. And so I knew something was wrong. And so then I said, okay, going plant-based is going to heal my gut. And I did feel better because I clearly I had maldigestion. I wasn't digesting these heavy animal proteins well. I didn't have the capacity to really break down and tolerate, especially ultra processed food. So now I was kind of just lightening the load on my gut, and it did get better. But again, it was one extreme to the next. James went from being an Atkins gym bro to this plant-based hippie. Yeah. And, again, I went from being this healthier Mediterranean American diet to now this whole food, plant-based, salt, oil, sugar-free diet. And I remember having this moment I needed to go to Target to pick things up, and I was hungry while I was there. And everything I picked up was a no. And I found a banana. And then I had this moment where I was like, I think I have an eating disorder. This just doesn't feel healthy, that I can come into a store and there's one thing that I'll pick up and that meets all the criteria that we're following. And so it became very evident. One, my gut isn't healed fully. Yes, I was better, but it wasn't healed. And my relationship with food was awful and very stressful and overwhelming and way too controlled. And I think it was also around that time where we were realizing there was more. There was more under the surface that was happening.
And what I'll say is this is where like we try to be unbiased here. We go, okay, there's similarities between like this like extreme plant-based and even the extreme carnivore, because when you do either of them, you eliminate so much of the hyper-processed food and maybe a lot of these foods that aren't serving you. And you do have this honeymoon phase in both of like, I feel amazing. Well, it's because, yeah, you're not eating those Kraft cheesy singles anymore or whatever you were. I know. Yeah. And so all those things you see, that's been cut out on both of these options. Yeah. But then you start to find out, okay, well, what's really underneath that and what's underneath that? And that's where we found ourselves was on top of that. I mean, to add context, and this is where you're not alone in this. You likely have, whether it's a best friend, a sister, a brother, a spouse, whoever's with you, there's relational things. And for us, Dahlia and I ended up getting engaged, getting married, having a wedding, buying a house and a baby. That's all within, well, I'll say all within 2 to 3 years. So pretty wild. So which life doesn't stop, right? It's not gonna be like, pause, I have IBS. Okay, I'm not gonna go to work. I'm not gonna pay my bills. I'm not gonna live life until I figure out this IBS. It's like, no, you're figuring out all these health issues while you're having babies and buying a house but we did it so fast. And part of that was a little bit of both our traumas there that we didn't fully understand at the time, of going like, okay, we got to just do this on our own and figure everything out. We were very much two independents coming together and be like, we're going to be the most independent people possible and do everything all at once. And so on top of all that stress, we were doing the stress of like, oh, Dahlia's gut is not better on this fully plant-based diet. What are we going to do? And so I remember at one point Dahlia being on, if anyone remembers, the AIP, which is still a thing, but it's not as popular, autoimmune paleo diet. And I remember her basically just eating cassava and like, it was like limited vegetables and cassava. And it was like, I remember being concerned. Yeah, she did a plant-based AIP. So it was basically like an extreme elimination diet, which we still see people on today. And again, being unbiased on both sides, you could do a plant-based AIP, or you're also on like a carnivore, which is basically an extreme elimination diet. When you're like, my meal is just eggs and bacon and steak, and eggs and bacon and steak and butter and eggs and bacon. It's like you're on an extreme elimination diet. It's not something sustainable. It's not something you want to do long term. Just in the same way cassava and like root vegetables and, whatever, sunflower seeds is not.
I still can't eat most of those.
She still can't because you ate so much of those. And like sweet potato, I think, was another one that you were doing. And that's when it was concerning. And we're going, okay, we're trying to live this life, but you can't, like you're stuck. Mm-hmm. And so
it was around that time, yeah, I started learning and working in this functional medicine clinic. So I was like, okay, great. And they were talking a lot about gut health and autoimmune. And I was like, wait, that's me. These people are talking about me. So in learning more about functional medicine, I thought, okay, well, I just need to add all these supplements. That's what I'm missing. It's okay that I'm on this really restrictive diet. I'll just make up whatever I'm missing in 25 supplements that I'm going to take per day. And I started doing that. And I remember in the clinic that I was working, I was with a naturopath, he was an acupuncturist, and my boss wanted us to run detox programs. And so I was in charge of the detox program, and she wanted me to try it since I was running it. So I did. Again, I'm already plant-based, autoimmune, paleo, I'm already doing all these things. So then I was like, why not eliminate more? I'm already very low.
Our daughter was 2 at the time. We had a home, we were house poor. We were just starting our careers kind of. So, I mean, imagine and then marriage, we're new into our marriage and figuring out, oh my gosh, this is a whole thing. This is our thing. So just to add all that context.
And all that's going on at the same time. And then James brings me this idea of, all right, let's both quit our jobs and start our own private practice, or let's join this other private practice that wants us to work there. And I was like, what? And so we're doing all this. I'm doing the detox. We're selling our house so we can start our business. And I remember before that happened, I used to get what I called stomach attacks, where there was always several factors that would happen together. Now looking back, it was always when there was a lot going on socially. I was stressed. And now I know I'd be eating a lot of sulfur. So if I had like a lot of broccoli, cauliflower, I'd have these stomach attacks where I'd be doubled over in pain. I'd be like, hey, James, I'm really sorry. Take care of our daughter. I need to go lay down.
Some water.
Lay down. I just had to be in complete silence. And then, it would pass. And so I was having more frequent stomach attacks. And then all this came to a head. And my stomach attack wasn't going away with all my usual things. I was resting. I was doing all these things at that time. Not only was all this going on, I lost someone who's very close to me, my best friend's dad growing up. And so I was there. I was with my daughter. We were giving condolences. We were, gathering to give condolences. And I had my stomach attack. And I couldn't drive us home. My parents had to drive. They had to drive my car. They drove their car. They took me home. And it wasn't getting better. So at that time, we were working in a private practice with a gastroenterologist. And so I called her.
It was today?
Tomorrow. Oh, yeah, today. Yes. So exactly.
Anniversary of this happened.
Yes.
Wild.
6 years today. Yes. I had my stomach attack. And so I called my friend, the gastroenterologist, and said, hey, this is what's happening. What do you think it is? And she said, okay, either you've ruptured an ovarian cyst or it's your appendix. Either way, go to the hospital. So we went to the hospital. It was Valentine's Day of 2019. That was our date. We asked my family to take care of our daughter. And we went there and they did all the scans. It wasn't my ovaries. It wasn't anything. I was having an appendicitis attack. And so they said, it looks like it's about to rupture. And James is there arguing with the ER doctor and he's asking.
My research and going like, can we, because I in my mind, and honestly, my toxic mind was like, we're going to save her appendix. Like, I'm like, the appendix, I know everyone thinks it's not important, but it's so important. I was like, can we do a mega dose of antibiotics? Like I was trying, and one of the surgeons got so mad at me, he left. He fired me. I was his patient. And I was like, wait, where's the other doctor? And they were like, you're going to have this doctor now. So anyway, she told me, she's like, girl, you're beyond saving. Your appendix is supposed to be about this big, the size of a pinky. Yours is this big and it's about to rupture and that's dangerous. So I was like, take it out. And I remember we got into a fight and I was like, it's my appendix. It needs to go. I cannot get sepsis right now. I think I was more upset about your appendix than you were.
Yes. So that, it all was there and I lost my appendix. And, it was at that time where just life was so intense. It was intense not only again starting this new business and moving, and we had a toddler to take care of. I had emergency surgery and just knew we weren't coping well behind the scenes. And I remember telling James that, what is the point of being married to health if we're not married anymore? So we knew it was bad, the way that we were coping with it all.
There are lots of gut powders and gut supplements out there, but hopefully this quick analogy will help you choose the right one. When it comes to gut supplements and gut powder, think of your gut as a garden. And in this garden, you can plant seed, you can transplant plants, or you can also facilitate healthy soil so things will naturally grow. What we opt for and what we recommend on a daily basis when it comes to taking a gut supplement is to opt for the supplement that will help the soil be healthy. This is essentially a compost for the gut. This helps ensure your gut soil is healthy, your microbiome is thriving with your own personalized fingerprint in your gut microbiome. If you're taking probiotics and not sure what they do, it's like transplanting plants that belong in tropical South America to Alaska. Sure, you can do it, you can spend money on it and time on it, but it won't last long. Instead, ensure that your soil in your gut, which is the gut structure and gut function that you uniquely have, is ready to facilitate healthy seeds, healthy probiotics coming from your environment, from your food, and so on. That is why we formulated Gut Nurture. So I was a nervous wreck. My anxiety was through the roof. And at that time, I was realizing, just how bad my anxiety was, that I had just been, it was this box that I kept nice and neat inside of me. And it was starting to just come out and spill out and open up. And I was doing everything. I couldn't I couldn't take on a child, a marriage, a wife, spiritual life, a business life, all these things, and keep my box intact. And that was one of the worst feelings. But on it, looking back, though, was God. Like, that's where God came in and was like, let it happen. And it was so scary of like, you gotta just let this thing rupture and you're gonna be a complete mess. And I was like, I was almost like this argument. I was like, no, like I don't wanna do that. This is gonna feel horrible. I don't wanna feel all the pain I've stuffed deep down inside from my childhood and all the pain of all these things. No. It was almost like, it's almost like someone skydiving, right? Where it's like you want to do it, and then you're there like, no, wait. And then they just like push you out. And it felt like that, like, and I'm pushed out. And that's when things just started rupturing, where we were fighting more. And I started to realize my mom was still in our life pretty heavily at that time. And she was just causing so much division and stress. And not to put her, that's maybe a whole nother episode of like Dr. Phil or something, I don't know. But you know, it was the division where, and this is where something we tell our patients now, which is super important, is like, it's not always what you're eating, it's who you're eating with sometimes, right? So whether that's the spouse or the parent or whoever, and it was this enmeshment of my family that was still involved in our life. And it was such a traumatic time because my mom was the type, this is one thing I'll maybe say about this, where it's like, she's the type where it's like, hey, I'm gonna tell you this, but don't tell Dahlia. Little things like that. And if you want a good marriage, you do not keep anything from your wife. And so it was things like that I started realizing, like, why are you doing this? Like, this is really bad. And so even the foundation of I had, well, at least I have my mom, that was starting to crumble as well. So this little perfect box was like rupturing of like, oh my gosh, it started to feel like it's all on me. I have to fix all this. I have to help my wife be healthy, and I have to do, and little did I know, I was just like escaping. I just found myself being like, was fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I would freeze. I would fall asleep. I was literally like that fainting goat at times, and just couldn't do things. And it would leave poor Dahlia like, my husband died and or at least he's dead for this moment. And she couldn't rely on me. And that was adding another layer of resentment. And so all this is happening while we're like, and gut issues. And all this is happening while we're trying to be healthy. But our plant-based diet is perfect. But on the outside, we're posting all of our food on Instagram. What do you mean it's not working? Like, so it was so silly at that time where we were trying to do this thing, but internally, and I don't think we were even fully we can say all this now, looking back, but at the time we weren't even conscious of it. So from there, we didn't fully understand it. So I guess the beauty from there, though, really made us spend a lot of time in the gut microbiome. And so we did take that leap. We went into practice with another provider. We started our own, I don't know if you want to add anything else from the appendix stuff, but we took the leap. We went into private practice. So we did that, even on top of all this. Somehow the Band-Aids were working, and I was like, okay, but we're going to do this, and we're going to fix this, and we're still doing that. And I think that was a blessing looking back, because it made us dive deep into the gut microbiome. And that's when we started to figure things out on like, oh, there's a thing called SIBO. And there's a thing called, and again, that's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And yes, dysbiosis happens full body. And really this gut is the hub, it's the epicenter, and it's the gut hormone axis and the gut brain axis. And
we were learning about the low FODMAP diet and why even on a plant-based diet, if you're eating certain carbohydrates, they might be a little bit more fermentable depending on who's living in the gut. So we were definitely learning a lot, not only personally, but professionally.
Yeah, and I do have to shout out, like, one thing that saved us truly was our faith. And even though, again, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. There was something calling me, at least in my gut and my soul, to like do Married to Health, like do this. It was crazy. We sold our house, we went into private practice, and that was a whole nother trauma fest, because we were in practice with another provider, and it got too big too quickly, and people got very greedy very quickly, and we were like, we have to leave. So that was another layer of trauma where we branched off from that and just completely did our own thing, which is a whole nother episode.
In the midst of the pandemic at the time where we're like, okay.
Yeah, and then COVID, and we're like, oh, what's this going on? And our daughter's now home from school and doing school here.
But I think the way that everything kind of happened I always feel like it's divine because, at that time, yes, the world is chaos, but you had started therapy at that time, which was really good.
My brain is failing me a bit. My soul and my emotions are failing me. And really quick, we say there are 3 types of stress. There's 3 main categories. There's the physical, right? You can get into an accident. You can have an injury. There's the emotional, right? And even the mental emotional. And then there's the chemical. So substance abuse, food, drink, just the McDonald's I was talking, the Kraft singles, and so those are the 3 big categories. And so I felt good with the chemical and the physical for the most part. It was the emotional for me that was like, oh, now it was like, it was whispering, I was talking, now it's screaming, and I couldn't deny it anymore. This was hindering me, no matter how many plants I was eating, no matter how many supplements I was taking, no matter whatever we were doing, how much money we were making. It was like, oh, this is such a weak area that it's weakening everything. And we were on the brink of just complete destruction, quite literally. And
it's hard when you're trying to build things up. You're trying to build a family. You're trying to build a business. I'm trying to build back my gut health. And so much is crumbling behind the scenes. And so it's reaching out and getting those resources of saying, okay, I'm not doing well mentally. I need to get into therapy. I'm not doing well spiritually. I'm not doing well nutritionally. It's really having those come to Jesus moments with yourself of, I need help, and who is available to help me? Because all of us need different types of help. So for us, that was a good first step. And I think, again, everything is always the time that it needs to happen. And, I definitely believe in divine timing, but having that better mental stability prepared us for our next challenge, because we thought, okay, that was so hard. We dealt with all that stuff. That was so overwhelming. 2021, our business, we finally get it up and running. Things are going well. My mom passed away suddenly. So yeah, we thought, okay, COVID's here. We're deep into it. Things, again, my mom's her own episode as well. I guess we'll need to do an episode on our moms. But my mom had so much going on with her own health that, we all got COVID as a family when my brother came to visit us from Virginia. And my mom was the one who got sickest. She was hospitalized for 2 weeks. She did come home for 2 weeks. We didn't realize she had picked up an infection in the hospital. So after being home, she was getting worse and worse, and then went back to the hospital and never came home. So it was, I think, a blessing in disguise that James had started to stabilize his mental health, because I would not have gotten through that if I had to deal with all of that and all of what was usually going on and the way that we were coping with hard things. And so then after that, I was like, okay, I need my own support as well of dealing with this complex grief and all that we're, dealing with. And so I myself got into therapy, and that was so great because I remember sharing with my therapist, I'm just so overwhelmed. And she was like, well, that's overwhelming what you just told me. But my therapist was really amazing at recognizing you're too good at masking and talking about these things. You're telling me all these traumatic things like you're talking about the weather. So talk therapy is never going to work for you. You need to do somatic therapy. So with my therapist, I did EMDR. It's an eye movement desensitization technique where you're talking about these hard things, but you're reprocessing them in your brain with your eyes moving back and forth while you're talking about them. And I did that for a few years and really learned such important skills, released a lot of trauma, whether I knew it was traumatic for me or not, or whether I knew how much I was holding on to certain things or not. And then, along that, we're doing therapy, right? We jump into things hard, if you guys can't tell. We jumped into plant-based hard. We jumped into, we're not going to just start a company. We're going to sell our house and jump into it. So we're like, let's add more therapy. We're going to start marriage therapy as well. So we started marriage therapy and learning more tools and techniques and coping skills.
We were doing more therapy than anything else.
Our therapy budget was really large. Yeah, absolutely. But I think it was all so necessary because people always ask me, now here I am years later, right? I'm almost 40 years old and people ask me, what'd you do to heal your gut? What'd you eat? They always want to know that. What did I eat? Yes, I ate fermented foods and I ate the gooey foods to heal my mucosal barrier and I ate protein and I ate plants, but I also ate therapy and I ate spirituality and I ate movement and I ate self-reflection and honesty and I ate relationships with others. Like there's so much that you need to do to not only heal with each meal with those foods, but really feel with each meal. And for me, that was also the part that I was missing because again, it was, all right, we really cleaned things up chemically. We really cleaned things up physically as much as we could. It was that emotional cleanup that I was really in dire need of. And that was so important. That was the thing on my gut healing journey. I truly feel like, because I know that I did all the other things, and without that emotional healing, I would not be where I am today, where I can eat whatever I want and I can go wherever I want. And it is extremely rare that my gut will speak up and say, hey, I'm unhappy. And it still is when I'm overwhelmingly stressed. Yeah. So that's still my trigger to this day. We just now have better coping skills where that happens very few and far in between.
And really, this is just the other side of the coin, because so many times we're talking about the other side of the coin, which is the low sulfur diet and the low FODMAP diet and the low histamine and the science of it. And yes, there's a lot to still learn there, and that is all important. And we were going through that almost simultaneously, making these protocols and making our company and helping patients all during this time and building all of this. But this other side of the coin, the spiritual, emotional, for us was massive. And looking back, that was like, without that, I don't think we'd be.
And not just us, I think so many people. And we do know, experiencing early adverse child events and traumatic events, especially in the first 5 to 8 years of your life, it increases your risk for IBS 300 to 600%. And so if more people started there, which is harder to do than with food. I still have this conversation with my patients so frequently where they're like, but what if I just took away this one food? And I'm like, you've done that already. Or, just make me a meal plan. I always remind them, that's not what you're here for. Because you could have Googled and found yourself a meal plan. There's more that needs to be done underneath the surface. And I know that because I had to do that uncomfortable work as well. And we always say it's like, you had an injury, it scabbed over, scarred, maybe it didn't scar well. And sometimes you need that revision. You need to remove that scar tissue. You need to get a surgeon to redo it for you. And then you're so much better. So sometimes it is the discomfort of opening things back up so you can really repair from underneath. And then inside and out, you can heal with each meal.
And if I can share, like from a male perspective, a husband, a spouse, the scabbing was around my heart the most. Like the scabbing that I didn't want to touch. This box that I've been saying was really a scab around my heart. It was a hardening of my heart that I didn't dare want to touch that wound and open it up. But I found, in order to truly love my wife, I had to do that. I had to go through the pain of reopening this scab and finding like, oh, I didn't really love myself. So how could I love this beautiful woman who I was trying to? It was almost like I was a dyslexic. Like I'm trying to read and talk to you. Or like I couldn't understand until I went through the pain of reopening all of that and going through that pain so then I could truly feel what love was for myself and then for you. And then that healing was like exponential in your gut. And so that was so important. And then from a provider standpoint, now I can't even tell you, just in the last week, I had at least 2 of my patients say, my dad was an alcoholic. And and just brush over it, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Like that's important. Like you're here and that's a part of your health story. And whether you realize it or not, and I know that like that hardening, it's much easier just to brush over it and be like, it's not a big deal. Like, well, doesn't that everyone's parent is kind of like that or have something? And it's like, well, no, that's massive, right?
And you can see that as a son and a dad of just massive. How that impacts.
Yeah. And so, yes, it's the protocols and supplements are important and all these things, but this other side, this other layer that can be very, very difficult is just as, if not more important. I know it for sure was for us. And it's vital. It's vital to the health of your heart, of your spirit, of your relationship, of your gut. It's all connected. So like our tagline is heal with each meal, but we're adding feel with each meal. We're at,
we have a somatic dietitian on our team who does somatic work because you can't have one without the other. If you don't feel with each meal, I don't know that you can ever heal with each meal. Yeah. We've seen that in the data. We've seen that anecdotally, IRL. And yeah, we are sharing it with everyone we can.
Yeah. So very important. I think, well, I know there's so much more. I know we can, there's so much more we can talk about. And I think we do need a mom episode if we want to dive into that. That'll be a doozy. But a mom episode, but I would love to open it up, I think, to any questions here. And even for those wanting to share, because one of the things too, it feels good to talk about these things. There was a time in my life I couldn't even talk to you about these things, let alone be like, I'm going to share it on our podcast.
And it's so interesting because we talk to ourselves so much about it. And it's so hard to let other people in. A lot of the times, especially when we freeze, we're just frozen, overwhelmed, overrun with emotion, berating ourselves and criticizing ourselves. And so it can be so freeing to open up to somebody else and let someone else give you love, if nothing else, if not advice, if not tools, just accepting that love that sometimes we act like we don't need, but we all do. Absolutely. So if you've tried all the supplements and diets and exercises and peptides and all of it, you've done it all.
Yeah.
We recommend starting there.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for letting us share our story. It's one we've never shared in such detail, and it seems like more details we can share. But it's nice to talk about it. And again, remind people we are married to health. We are married to each other. We're real people and we've had a real journey, and we see it as blessing of.
It's not easy.
Oftentimes, it's not easy, but it's better together. And when you can be honest and share it with others, and you get what others are going through because you've gone through it by yourself. Yeah. So if anyone has questions.
Yeah.
I have a question about gut health with COVID. Just curious, how much did it change from like before COVID and after?
Yes. So, we're seeing so much data on how much COVID shifts the gut. And again, I mentioned we lost my mom to, a secondary infection from COVID. She ultimately passed from a certain drug-resistant bacteria she picked up. But if she hadn't been so inflamed and vulnerable from not only COVID, but so many other things, she'd probably still be here with us. But we've seen that COVID is so inflammatory, not just in the moment, but triggers such an inflammatory cascade throughout the body, where so many people were noticing a couple weeks or months after having COVID, they're having this extreme hair shedding, right? That's inflammation, and that's what inflammation is going to do. It's not just external with what you can see, it's internal absolutely as well. So we're seeing such a shift in the microbes post-COVID and post other strong viruses as well. You can see it when people have Epstein-Barr virus or mono, cytomegalovirus, other really infectious viruses can trigger the same. They will trigger and turn on this inflammatory cascade. It's really about how quickly you can turn it off. And ultimately that can be genetic with how quickly you can turn it off. It's certainly your lifestyle. If you're not sleeping, moving, eating, breathing, pooping, doing all the basics to decrease your inflammation day to day, you are more susceptible for post-COVID syndrome. And we are still seeing people with post-COVID syndrome years after they've gotten their initial COVID infection. We're hearing a lot more about histamine intolerance post-COVID. That is part of that inflammatory cascade where the immune system starts to put out not only these inflammatory molecules, but also histamine is one of them. And it's not just going to trigger these allergic symptoms where your eyes, nose, and throat are itchy, but your gut can be really irritated. Yeah, you can have more brain fog and fatigue and dizziness, and you can have a racing heart and more rashes and skin flushing and so many other things from these histamines. But anything that's going to really overstimulate your immune system can trigger these histamine issues. And so we're seeing that in so many people. We might have seen people have autoimmune diseases triggered post-COVID because your immune system's just overstimulated. So again, if you're not doing that other work underneath, you're more susceptible to that. That's a good question.
I'll just add, well, if there's more questions, but the virome. So just like we have a microbiome, we have a virome. And technically the virome is not part of the microbiome. It's so massive, it's its own entity that interacts with the microbiome. And so there are viruses in our food, there's viruses in the air, there's viruses in our body, there's viruses that are specific to bacteria called bacteriophages. And so there's so many viruses that what's happening, and I think like those who are susceptible, like Dahlia's mom, who's been living with chronic disease her entire life, their virome's on the brink. So when you add a match to a dry forest, so enter the COVID virus, it is a massive flame that you
and especially if your other biomes are off. So your microbiome is off, your fungalome is off. And how many people are walking around like that because they're taking antibiotic after antibiotic and, you know, they have all these other issues. And definitely my mom was one of those people. She had chronic sinus issues. Upon getting COVID, she was on antibiotics for what she thought was a sinus infection. But now we know
she was on a long course of antibiotics and immune suppressants where she shouldn't have been leading up to that. So we know that factored in, and it's just very upsetting. Again, whoever was her care team at the time didn't know these things, didn't have these tools, and was just kind of doing a protocol that didn't work and actually made things much, much worse. And so it's very hard to think about sometimes, but yeah.
I was going to say, I just left this exact conversation about how as we've specialized in medicine, we've kind of fragmented, and that's what leads to kind of what your mom went through, is this doctor's only looking at this one thing and this one thing, and then the whole person's never taken into account anymore. And so I think it's really great that you brought in the somatic work and some of those other practices to yours, because that's what has kind of been lost in healthcare.
Yes, absolutely. And even though you have this, you know, foreman, the primary care provider, you get 7 minutes with them. And if you're using insurance, and that's really hard for one person to put all these, okay, you're seeing 16 specialists, and tell me what every single one of them is doing in our 7-minute visit. So absolutely, I think it's so important for people to advocate for themselves. Nowadays, we have so many more resources with concierge practitioners if one can afford it. We have other integrative and, you know, some functional providers who can provide just more of a breadth of what somebody should be looking at so they can prevent those things. And it also requires a person to be open to it because, you know, again, I would have loved to help my mom more than I could, but she wasn't open to it all the time. And so you also have to have that open heart and open mind to receive some of these different things.
And now it's even the love for myself of going, I wish I would have done all this work 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And there's some of that too. Like you don't know what you don't know. And it is even accepting like, okay, I found it out, but man, wow, I wish I would have learned that sooner. But that's the importance of if you have something like that, talk about it. Because there's someone listening, there's one of our patients that's going, oh wow, I didn't know that. And that's maybe a lot sooner for them, at least, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Like I know you guys, but like this was just like I was getting teary-eyed, like, you know, learning so much about the other side of the coin, because when we look at you on social media, it all seems like, yeah, healed, right? But where did it start? How long it took, and what all modalities of healing that you had to adopt to get here and continue the healing process. So thank you so much for your vulnerability. I was
Thank
just
you.
curious about, when you had to get your appendix removed, like how did that impact? Like, I'm just curious about more enzymes and things like that that you have to take to help with digestion.
So that's a really good question. Thank you. And really, I think just commenting on that first comment, that is also heal with each meal, because you're never going to stop eating and be like, oh, I healed with that last meal, I'm done eating for the rest of my life. And that's really, I think, what that feel with each meal is also about. You're never going to stop feeling. And so it's just continuing to be open to it and process it. But with what my body went through and what my appendix processed. So what we know about the appendix, so many people say it's a useless organ. There are no useless organs. Every single organ has a purpose. Even if you can survive without an organ, you might not thrive without the organ. So we have so many people out here. I've lost 2 of mine. I miss them. I miss my tonsils. I miss my appendix. Now I know those are both involved in the lymphatic system, and they were supporting one another. So my appendix didn't have as much lymphatic support because I lost one of my main lymphatic organs when I was younger. And so many people are out here walking around without a gallbladder and without so many other organs. But the appendix is not useless. It's an important reservoir for microbes to the gut. That's why it's adjacent to the gut. If you want to know where your appendix is, it's near your right hip. And it will communicate and support the gut as it needs. But the more your gut, it's a relationship, right? The more unhealthy your gut becomes towards the appendix, the more unhealthy the appendix becomes back. And so in my case, my gut was so unhealthy at that time. Again, even though I was eating perfectly, doing that detox, I think, kicked up so much dirt from my fat stores and other places where I was holding toxins, and my poor gut was trying to process them. And even though I was doing all the right support detox supplements, I wasn't on binders. I didn't know about binders at that time. And so then I look back, I'm like, how many of my patients needed binders on these detoxes? Yes, we were giving them all the right vitamins for their liver to try to process some of these toxins, but how many of them needed binders like I did? For when these microbes were getting broken down, they were releasing these endotoxins, and they were getting that die-off, or that endotoxemia as it's called, like I evidently was. And so again, my gut was more toxic at that time from this overwhelming amount of toxins. My appendix became the same. And so following losing my appendix and recovering from the antibiotics, right? Every time you get a surgery, a lot of people don't know this. Anytime you get surgery, they have to give you antibiotics. So unless you specifically request that you are not given antibiotics, and if your care team's willing to take on that risk, you get antibiotics. Whether you're discharged with them or not depends. But I got both. I got IV antibiotics during my surgery. I was discharged with some antibiotics. So I needed to recover my microbiome following that. And again, hearing my gut health story, and to even get to that point to lose my appendix, all of my 5 M's were off. So we talked about our 5 M's very recently. Last time we were here, we talked about them. But for those who aren't familiar, the 5 M's, the major M's of a well-functioning gut, are your microbes, your motility, or that movement in the gut, your membranes or your mucus, so the actual skin, that gut epithelia, and that mucus that protects it. You have your mind, and then you have your metabolic organs. All of mine were a mess. So, and it really, again, everything came to a head at the appendix, because up until that point, I was really just doing the diet part of it. I was doing the diet and exercise. So that wasn't addressing my membranes. That wasn't addressing my mind. That wasn't addressing so many of the other things. Yes, my microbes were shifting a little bit. My metabolic organs were supported a little bit in that. My motility was certainly supported in my extremely high fiber diet, probably too much fiber. But my membranes and my mind really needed my support after that. So it did. It involved me doing things for all of my 5 M's after that. That was my wake up call. That was I really need some TLC. So I supported my membranes with things like enough protein. I made sure I was eating enough protein. I was on a very low protein diet, obviously, when I was so focused on that perfect plant-based diet, that whole food plant-based diet. And I was like, beans are my protein. That is not a good protein source. That is not a good protein source on its own. So I started eating more high protein plant foods like tofu and tempeh and pumfu, which is pumpkin seed tofu. And instead of beans, I would eat like a fava tofu and things that were a lot more concentrated. that were plant-based. And so eating more protein, taking supplements, whether that was L-glutamine and acetylglucosamine. I took things for my mucus like aloe and okra and marshmallow root. I made sure that I was properly supporting my metabolic organs with what they needed, whether that was things like green tea and matcha and milk thistle, NAC, different supplements that could support your metabolic organs. I made sure my motility was perfect as it could be, not too fast, not too slow. And so all of them really got addressed. But adding probiotics was so important, whether it was fermented foods, taking a daily probiotic. That's the level of support I needed. So I was really in a bad place and needed a lot of support.
Okay, this program is not for you if you're looking for a quick fix and you're not willing to put in the work. We have spent years and years creating a program that actually helps you get to the root of gut dysbiosis like SIBO and IBS, but it is not for you if you're looking to get better in just 1 week and something very, very quick. We have made it simple, affordable, and go at your own pace, but you still will be the one putting in the work to get better and truly overcome your SIBO and IBS. Take advantage of the current sale price for the Good Gut SIBO IBS program because it will be ending soon. I would say that was huge. Like there was a time where we really got on our probiotic game of like understanding the different strains and which ones should be taken for here and there. And on top of that, fermented foods and really getting on our fermented food routine. Because until then, we're like, yeah, we eat fermented foods here and there. But it was like, I can say confidently today, we have at least 4 servings of fermented foods a day, every single day. And if I don't, I notice the difference. I feel the difference because we are constantly being bombarded. We are losing microbes. It's a war. There's a war going on with our microbes and they are like trying to hang in there. And when you replenish them, it's like, oh, thank you. Because the environment, the pollution, one of the things we talk about is binders, just as a quick example, because many people are like, what the heck is that? You could do this experiment. Many of us don't eat the peel of citrus, right? So one of our favorite binders is modified citrus pectin. And so if you take a peel and you drip some fat on it, you'll see it really do something cool. It like absorbs deep into the skin. And so this modified citrus pectin likes to hold on to lipophilic toxins and fat. And so if you're like, oh, I have high cholesterol, or oh, I'm on this, or I'm losing a lot of weight, and I've never lost this amount of weight before, you're maybe not feeling well. So when we have patients who are losing weight, or again, we were talking earlier about dropping inflammation, or like on these protocols, it's like, are you on a good binder? Because yes, your foundation of food is important. Fiber does bind, but there's also enhancements to that. And again, depending on what's going on, this is where the right supplements in the customized way are great, not just I'll take all 25 supplements and not know what I'm doing. Huge difference. So that's important to add to everything we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So very long answer for that.
And it can be unique for different people. And, just speaking of the microbes as well, I think it's really relevant of people understanding, yes, you don't want to have gut issues, but certain microbiome types are more dangerous than others. And I didn't realize that, again, at the time. I didn't have the level of education in the microbiome that I have now. But now knowing that microbiome type that I had, where it was more of a sulfury pattern, not only inflamed my appendix, but that's the type of microbe that inflames your intestines more. So those sulfate-reducing bacteria, those SRBs, they are implicated in inflammatory bowel disease, so Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, in appendicitis, in colon cancer, and we're hearing so much lately, right, about colorectal cancer. We've just lost 2 really big celebrities in this just month to colorectal cancer. It's the fastest rising cancer under 50 years old, and it is highly involved with the microbiome. So it's so important for people to understand that it's not just the stinky gas that you're having. It's not just that. These increase your risk for other really insidious cancers and other inflammatory conditions that can be preventable and prevented with the right tools. So working with the right person is important.
We were just chatting. We were really interested in binders. And I was saying, I did a parasite cleanse once and I didn't know you should take something with it. And then I had felt super sick and flu-like. And then I researched and I started taking activated charcoal. But I was wondering, what are other kinds of like binders and what are they good for, even if you're not doing a detox? And kind of how can they work with your body? Because I'm just familiar with like a few of them. And I didn't know about the orange peels. That was really fascinating too.
Well, can I add the simple? Well, like a simple one is like that's where like plants. I mean, don't get us wrong. Like plants are key because all the different pectins and carbohydrates and fibers in plants will be at the foundation. This binding capacity of your body. You do want to be binding. We're binding every day, almost every millisecond of every chemical reaction happening in our body. But then there's layers to it. There's a next level of it where for example, like the modified citrus pectin is a really cool binder. It's a more powerful binder than, say, you could eat a citrus peel. You can be like, I'm gonna eat citrus peel to get this extra pectin. It's more customized, it's more concentrated. So that's an example. But at the foundation, this is where eating plants is key. And then I will just add, and Dahlia can continue, but like you do have a parasitome as well. And what's really cool is we learn about parasites, they're not all bad. There's actually quite a bit of therapy and research going on with IBD using parasites. We're actually finding some parasites help us balance our virome and our fungulome and our microbiome as a whole. There's some parasites, there's actually bacteria that help balance parasites, and some parasites help balance viruses. And this is where I geek out on this, where it's just, does that remind you of our ecosystem, of how the hawks balance the snakes and the snakes balance the rats, and that's what's happening in our gut, right? And so we have to be so careful. And I know that's with Gen Z and younger, like on TikTok, I'm seeing it, like parasite cleanse and buy the TikTok shop and boom. And like, that's where you have to be so careful because you're dealing with an ecosystem that is, wow, that's like, are you putting in a match and you don't know you have all this tinder and you just think it's a quick parasite detox, and little do you know, you're not on a binder, and it's like, it just goes on fire. Right?
I've had a patient before. She did one only because her daughter was doing one and she wanted to support her daughter. And I was like, honey, you can support your daughter in so many other ways. She unfortunately really, really had gut issues after that. And she was fine prior to that parasite cleanse. She never needed. But yes, with the right binders, it can be so important. And we know it depends where you're binding things, because ultimately we have toxins that can be in different organs. Like we talked about, fat cells are great stores for toxins. We know that the joints become great stores for toxins. There are toxins in our cells. And ultimately, the body is trying to excrete these toxins. It's where is it trying to excrete them from? We have our major detox organs like our kidneys to produce urine to rid of certain water-soluble toxins. We have our skin, we have our lymph, we have our liver, gallbladder. The goal is to put as much through the gut and the colon as we can to try to detox it there. But sometimes you'll sweat things out. Sometimes you'll urinate things out. Different binders are going to work in different places. So a lot of the really strong or more aggressive binders, you used activated charcoal. That's fantastic for your lymph, gallbladder, liver to end up in the gut. So we have things like activated charcoal. You have zeolite clay, bentonite clay. Those are very binding. They do what they're supposed to do. They're called binders, they bind. So those might constipate one if you are using a binder like that's that aggressive. So if you're already constipated, that might be counterproductive because you're binding things in order to get rid of them. It's almost like, having electrolytes so you can be hydrated, but you took way too much salt and now you're dehydrated from it. So you want to find that balance. If you're somebody who's already constipated, maybe those aren't the binders for you, activated charcoal and bentonite and zeolite. Maybe you need to start with that modified citrus pectin, which is a little bit less constipating. We know we have other things that we can eat like parsley and chlorella, fantastic binders. So if you are needing a program and hopefully supervised by a practitioner, you can do things like that. We know also that things will bind on a cellular level. So we have things like spirulina is a fantastic one. We have fulvic and fulvic minerals, which are a fantastic binder, and humic acid, which is a fantastic binder. So including them, there's a few that have a blend. So if you're not constipated, I really like this blend called GI Detox, and it has several of those. It has apple pectin and activated charcoal and a blend. So binders can be so important for people to be using because, again, who knows? Hindsight is always 20/20, but I'm like, I wonder if I would have lost my appendix if I was on binders.
We're seeing, and there's really cool research, and I know we could keep answering or we keep adding to one question, but yeah, but when it comes to like the more aromatic, like the parsley or the cilantro and the herbs, and then the tinctures from those herbs, those are definitely going to lean more towards heavy metals. So if you do labs and you find, oh, this patient has a lot of heavy metals, so there are certain binders for heavy metals. And then the humic and fulvic, you might even do a lab and find out, oh, my patient is exposed to more pesticide residue, and those can lean more to some of the pesticides. So yeah, it's a little bit, that's where that customization, but there's a lot of these really great binders, and it's just customizing of like, okay, what does my patient need though? Because it's not a one size fits all for sure.
But yeah, we could all be eating binders every day with fiber. So those fruit skins, especially, eat your apple skin, eat a little bit of that white part of the oranges. I'm like, no, eat a little bit of that. It has good citrulline, it has good binders in it, it has citrus pectin.
That's where kumquats are really great.
Oh yeah, you just eat them.
You're getting really great.
They're those tiny, tiny, tiny little citrus fruit, yeah. And then eat cilantro, eat parsley, use chlorella, use spirulina if you can tolerate it. So yeah, great questions, thank you.
Is there anything related to the gut where something like whatever doesn't break you makes you stronger? Because like I feel like the gut area is so like deep and ecosystem wise, you need to get a good understanding. But I'm just wondering.
Yeah, no, I mean, we always make parallels to like exercise in the gut, right? And I think we're saying like, yeah, you don't start just lifting 300 pounds, you start smaller and build muscle. I mean, the gut is that. And really getting into, which I think we talk about a lot, but definitely this was kind of a different side of it. But in our protocols, we're all about adding foods back. And really, we coined the term kind of reverse elimination diet, where so many are on an elimination diet, whether knowing or unknowingly. And now it's time to reverse that elimination diet. And you're doing that in a gradual way. And when you do that, and you may be like, I'm a little uncomfortable. I haven't eaten lentils in 5 years, and now you want me to eat lentil soup? Well, lentils are some of the lower fiber legumes, or you can even do split pea soup. And when you do that, not many of us think about this, but you're introducing lentil DNA. You're introducing specific split pea histamines and DNA and viruses. You're reintroducing that back into an ecosystem. It's almost in the same way where we reintroduce chimpanzees to the wild, or we're going, this area, Yellowstone for a while didn't have wolves, and we're going, let's reintroduce wolves back into Yellowstone, and look how it starts to shape and reshape and rebalance the ecosystem. That's literally when you haven't been eating a certain type of food, your ecosystem is lacking that, and now you're going to slowly reintroduce, and watch how it just reshapes everything. And so yeah, and some of that, I'm a little more bloated, I'm a little more gassy, but we tell our patients like some of that is normal. It's not normal to like never be bloated, never be gassy, no fart club. Like, no, we're not in the no fart, like fart, okay? We're all human, you're gonna fart. Up to 20 times a day, but yeah, it shouldn't clear a room. It shouldn't be questionable. Is this a fart or is it something, and like you're having accidents, right? So like, it's that context, but totally what doesn't kind of kill you makes you stronger for sure in the right context.
I'll add, not just with food, but really with vagal tone as well. I think we're becoming more familiar with that vagus nerve, and that's one of our longest cranial nerves. It connects our gut to our brain to our gut. It really spans most of our body, tip to toe. But that vagus nerve receives more information from gut to brain than from brain to gut. We have 80% of signals going from gut to brain, 20% of signals going from brain to gut. And in the gut, that's where we're creating neurotransmitters and hormones as well. So things like serotonin, which helps us feel calm, and dopamine, which helps us feel happy, and GABA, which helps us feel balanced. Those are widely produced in the gut. And I always say the vagus nerve is kind of the elevator. So as you're challenging your gut a little bit more as well, you can also be challenging your vagus nerve. So you have better vagal tone, and there's a better, stronger an elevator, if you will. And it's simple things that you can do to exercise your vagus nerve, if you will. Little by little, you can do things like humming. And a lot of people do these things without realizing. When they're stressed, they'll just hum or want to sing. That actually tones your vagus nerve, and engaging your diaphragm in that way, because when you're singing, you take nice deep breaths, but also just that humming vibration vibrates that nerve and creates better vagal tone and vagal communication.
It's kind of beautiful though, taking it back to like what we're talking about is like, where we sing the most is like when we're at church. Going back to like how we healed like that spiritual, where are we clapping and doing these things, like the vibration, it's super special. And these are things as humans, as community, we've done for so long. And many of us just fairly recently are lacking and not doing that.
Yeah, but that can be, the simplest way, wherever you're doing it, of humming or singing, gargling, deep breathing. So whether that's during yoga practice or whether you're meditating and taking some of those nice deep breaths with that extended exhale, that is creating vagal tone as well. Now we have cool devices that are vagal stimulators where, they're massaging the muscles that connect to the vagus nerve as well. You have these sternocleidomastoid muscles in the front of your neck. So you have little devices that can do it for you, and you can outsource your vagal toning into something like that. Even just massaging here at the base of your skull, that creates that vagal tone. But that's a way to slowly but surely challenge your gut a little bit to build it up even stronger, because again, it goes back to that gut emotion, gut brain connection, where you could be eating all the perfect foods, but you have really poor vagal tone. Your vagus nerve connects in the part of your brain called your limbic system. And that tells you if you're either activated and sympathetic, ready to go into that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, or if maybe you're uncomfortable, but you're safe and you can be in the sympathetic, where you can rest and digest and you can feed and breed. So creating better vagal tone helps you control that a little bit more, where you're not just automatically snapping into sympathetic and freezing and, going to sleep or fighting. I'm a fighter. You have better control over that, where you're like, I'm uncomfortable, but I am safe. So you're able to really bring yourself back and really have that balance.
And I'll just add, I feel called to add, like, there's a really cool area of research called biofield energy research. And this is a really cool, I wish I had more time to read about this, but it's things like looking at fire and hearing fire and sound therapy. And that's where it gets into these, like what was woo woo, I think even when we were in college, it was like woo woo, but now it's like more common. You have sound bowls, and I think especially in LA or SoCal, I think it's more common. But if you go, 4 miles east, maybe not so much, or longer, not so much. Baldwin Park, it was not common. And so, but it's things like, and when you think about it, it's like, it's almost like humanity grew up like around these things. It's almost like we've been doing this for thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. Weird. And then all of a sudden we stop doing these things. So it's like asking yourself, and for our listeners as well, like, how many times have you hugged someone today? And like, are you looking at fire, natural light? And are you breathing? And are you in like a foresty area? And like, are you running and hitting that ground? It's not just for bone health, but those vibrations are helping your vagus nerve. It's like all these beautiful things that it's like it's so interesting, but it's so important and beautiful. And that is evidence-based. Like it's really cool. Yeah.
And it's becoming contrary to what, we're seeing in society. I've always said my biggest fear in life is that the movie WALL-E will come true, where we're just like bound to these chairs. We don't move. We have really poor vagal tone, probably, horrible gut health because we're just not nourishing ourselves. But yeah, it is just saying like, okay, what can I do little by little every single day to engage that vagus nerve, engage my vagal tone?
Just to try to bridge. So you had mentioned that you brought in a somatic dietitian.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what they go through, like the vagal toning and all of that, and is there more? I'm such a fan of somatic therapy in general, so I'm just interested.
And there's so many somatics. So somatics could be chanting. That is a type of somatic therapy. What I did with EMDR is a somatic therapy. It's anything that you can feel, right? That is somatics. And so Laura, our dietitian, uses neo-emotional release. So she's using a lot of breath work and a lot of mind-body connection, which does require your vagus nerve to participate, to have people identify where in their body they're feeling emotion and sensation, whether it's pain or whether it is tingling, whether it anywhere that they're feeling any type of sensation. She'll have them explore that and explore any type of emotions that are coming up when they're really hyper-focused on that area of their body. could be their gut. It could be their throat because there's something they're holding in or there's a trauma they've never released and talked about. It could be their neck because they're clenching and there's tension there regarding and related to something else. And so Laura really helps people, one, connect with their bodies, because I think it's so easy to not be connected with our bodies. It's always a sign when someone's not as connected with their body when they're saying the body instead of my gut, my thyroid. They're like, this is an out of body experience. This is just in general. So really connecting with the body, identifying it, and then working through it. It could be with breath work. It could be crying. That's an emotional release, to cry. It could be yelling and screaming. It could be shaking, but she helps guide people through that so they have a nice, safe session with it. And it's progressive and it's building so they can release that stored emotion that's been causing their body to speak up. So it's been really game changing. I've had some patients I worked with for a very long time, and I'll be honest with them and say, hey, I think we've done all we can with all of the nutritional changes, lifestyle changes, supplements. I think this really needs to be more of a somatic thing. And then they see Laura a few times and they're like, no, that was it. My gut's fine now. So again, just like we've experienced, it can be just that for some people. It can be all of it for other people, but we've seen incredible change with incorporating that. And we've just seen all the patients she helps as well. One of her main populations that she works with is the military. So our practice is a network with TRICARE, and she works with a lot of military vets who definitely have a lot of that stored trauma and benefit from her work.
Make sure you're doing emotional release after you're doing emotional, because it's a lot. Yeah, she's really good. Yeah. Thank you all. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Good Gut Live podcast. It was a very, I think, meaningful episode. It was an episode that was long overdue, but it's an episode that I think we were ready for. And obviously we could dive deeper. So if we need a part 2, we're going to do that. If we need a mom episode, we're going to do that. Those darn moms. And so we will do that. But we thank you so much. As always, we invite you, especially with this episode, to feel with each meal.
And always heal with each meal.
Thank you so much. Until next time, we'll see you wherever you're listening and watching. Thank you so much.